95 northbound of the 105. Now, it might still be blocking the right-hand lane. It is a slow drive from the 91. Looks like they're trying to get to the shoulder on their own. In Anaheim, watch out for a ladder on the 57 northbound for Ball Road. That's blocking the right lane.
Nearly 3,000 teen drivers die in car crashes each year. Tire Rack Street Survival is designed to save lives. The one-day hands-on driving school gives teens experience in car control through exercises that include emergency braking and skid recovery. Find a class near you at TireRack.com/survive.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers get 7 shutout innings from Clayton Kershaw to beat the Angels in Anaheim. First shutout win for the Dodgers since June 10th in Philadelphia. LeBron's younger son, Bryce, is transferring from Sierra Canyon High School to Campbell Hall in Studio City. The 16-year-old Bryce will be a junior in the fall. He's 6'6" and already showing star potential. LeBron's oldest son, Bronny, will be a freshman at USC in the fall. Here's something from the downright delusional department. People close to Memphis Grizzlies star John Morant told an NBA writer that the NBA and the media are out to get Morant. Morant was given a 25-game suspension at the start of next season for conduct detrimental to the league, including flashing a handgun in 2 social media videos. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Live from Demert Park, USA, I'm Tavis, Smiley, and you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to see you and me back in stride again. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. Our socials can be found at KBLA 1580. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Everything at KBLA 1580. Download our app right now, in fact, at KBLA 1580. Download the app and listen to us live anywhere in the world. You just heard Dominique for 3 hours live from South Africa. They're listening to us on the app in South Africa right now. So anywhere you are in the world in real time, you can hear us clear as a bell if you download the app right now at KBLA 1580. Should you miss us any day in real time, check out the podcast of our program by going to Apple, Spotify, Anchor, so many places to get the podcast and listen at your leisure should you miss us any day in real time. But I'm delighted to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. You can also watch the live stream of this program by tapping on the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. And let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour on June 29th, the California Reparations Task Force will hand over to the state legislature its extensive report and recommendations for compensation to eligible black Californians for the harms of slavery. So, now what? We'll talk about it in hour 2 with Chris Lodgton, lead organizer of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. In our third hour, we'll introduce you to the host of 2 new shows coming to KBLA Talk 1580 this week. As we begin year 3, we are thrilled that a recent independent research survey this week, in fact, finds that this station remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for black listeners and beyond for the second consecutive year. That's high cotton, and we are happy about that. That said, in hour 3, you'll meet John Wood Jr., host of the Reconstruction Project. And for all you foodies, you'll also meet Karen and Ernest, host of a brand new food show called Food for Thought. But in this first hour, 2 more conversations. On the B side of this hour, a conversation with Vanderbilt professor David Eichert about the recent Supreme Court voting rights decision that went against Alabama Republicans. We'll talk about that on the backside of this hour. But I'm pleased to commence today's program with the president of the LA City Council, Paul Krikorian, for a candid conversation about the curious case of LA City Councilman Curran Price, who, as we all know, has been charged with embezzlement and perjury. Mr. President, welcome back to KBLA Talk 1580. How are you today, sir?
Hi, Tavis. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I'm doing great. Thank you.
It's a great honor to have you. Thank you for the time. Let me jump right in. I want to make the most of our time between now and the bottom of the hour. So, again, thank you for this opportunity to query you about the Curran Price situation. Let me start with this. I'll start broad, and then we'll narrow as we move through this hour, this half hour, that is. At the moment, what is the situation in the council vis-a-vis Councilman Price, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. Just to start with, I learned about these charges pretty much at the same time that the media did, and I think that was when Mr. Price first learned about them as well. And so it came as a, needless to say, as a disappointing surprise to everyone. What we have done, Mr. Price wrote a letter to me, and he voluntarily agreed to step aside as the president pro tem of the council. And also he requested that while this was pending, that he be withdrawn from his committee work. And so I have removed him from all council committees. And since then, we have, just yesterday, we elected Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson as the new council president pro tem, and I appointed Councilmember Bob Blumenfield as the assistant president pro tem. So following the news being revealed to us about these charges, I initiated a motion to begin the process of suspension in the event that the council determined that that would be the appropriate action. Mr. Harris-Dawson also introduced a motion, which I seconded, that would begin a process of evaluating how to protect the district's voice in this process, to ensure that we have a process in place so that whatever action is ultimately taken, that the considerations of the district are taken into account, and the protection of the district is taken into account. And that's a more complicated, difficult question to answer, as we saw as we went through the experience with Councilmember Ridley Thomas, who was a suspended member of the council, who continued to remain as the council member. It presents limited options to be able then to ensure that the interests of the district are taken care of.
Mm-hmm. I want to give you a chance just to lay the land first for what's happening at the moment. Let me ask one other question, then I'll get to some more specifics here that I want to interrogate you on, if I can.
Sure.
What's on the Friday schedule? Is there something happening this Friday in council regarding this matter?
Yes. So both of our motions, both the motion that I introduced and Mr. Harris-Dawson's motion, will be heard by the Rules Committee on Friday. The Rules Committee consists of me, Mr. Harris-Dawson, and Councilmember Soto Martinez, who I appointed to that committee actually to replace Mr. Price. So we will be considering those two motions and deciding whether to proceed with either of them, and if so, under what circumstances. And then the Rules Committee will make their recommendation to the full council, and the council will have the opportunity to vote. I should note from the outset, Tavis, that my approach to this is that these are serious charges and the council needs to take them seriously. But at the same time, I take very seriously the notion that a person is innocent until proven guilty. These are only charges. And so we have to evaluate our course of action based on that bedrock constitutional principle as well.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, and with all due respect, that sounds like you're trying to have it both ways. Let me press you on that now that you've laid again out for us what's happening at the moment. It sounds to me that like you're trying to have it both ways. As I said a moment ago, you can't, on the one hand, respectfully, Mr. President, say publicly, as you have now once again on this program, that you believe in the presumption of innocence, but then move as swiftly as you have to call for his suspension. It seems to me like a rush to judgment. So let me just ask you point blank, how is it that we can say that we believe in the presumption of innocence? He hasn't even been arraigned as yet. There's been no arraignment yet, and this council is moving on Friday to suspend yet another African-American member of the city council. Is that not a rush to judgment? And I want to ask in a moment how you expect that the city will see your process different than that of Nuri Martinez. We'll get to that in a moment. But is this a rush to judgment if we really believe in the presumption of innocence when a guy ain't even been arraigned as yet?
Well, respectfully, Tavis, I would say it's the opposite of that.
Okay.
And as you've heard me say, I think publicly many times, we will not proceed in the same way that the previous council president proceeded with regard to Mr. Ridley Thomas, which was to put a motion before the council and demand a council vote as quickly as humanly possible. And at that time, you'll recall that many council members voiced concern about not thinking through what the next steps were and not considering what would happen to the district. I have said very publicly the exact opposite of that. I have said that, yes, we will introduce this motion. It'll be heard in the Rules Committee, but I've also said very publicly introducing this motion does not in any way presuppose that there will be a suspension. This is simply to allow the conversation to begin. It's not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation, and that conversation must include the people of the district. As you've pointed out, and it should include Mr. Price as well, because as you've pointed out, he hasn't even responded to these charges. We haven't seen any of the evidence supporting these charges yet. And so I think that it's important that both the Rules Committee and the Council take into account all of those things when deciding what, if any, steps should be taken next.
So I'm confused. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I'm confused, Mr. President. When you say that what you're doing on Friday is the beginning of a process, but it is the beginning of a process that ultimately leads to potentially suspension. So when you say that it may not result in suspension, if that's the way we feel, that the presumption of innocence ought to be respected, that due process ought to be respected, that fundamental fairness ought to be respected, why even begin the process at this point?
Well, that's a fair question. And I think I thought that it was important. The reason I introduced the motion was I thought that it was important, first of all, to make clear that when charges are filed against a sitting member, we are going to take those charges seriously, and we're going to, consider what options will be available to the council to deal with those, with that situation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't presuppose an outcome, and that's important to me because this process is important to me, and it's important that the voices of the people of the 9th District be heard as well.
Yep. I hear your point, but as we say, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. And my sense is if you start a process to move towards suspension, Of course, it does not presuppose what the vote is going to be, but given what happened to MRT, I don't see this ending any differently. I digress on that point for the moment. I think you take my point respectfully. I hear your point. I just think we disagree on what it means to start a process like this when a person has not as yet even been arraigned. And let me just pivot right quick, and I'll come back.
Sure.
I was reading a piece last night that you may have seen. If you haven't seen it, you are the president of the council. You are very, very busy. I know there's a lot of reading material on your docket. If you've not read this, I want to recommend it to you and to everybody listening right now. There's an article called "The Alleged Crimes of Curran Price Are Extremely Confusing." That's the headline. The alleged crimes of Curran Price are extremely confusing. You can find it at BennyWally.com. That's BennyWally, BennyWally.com. With all due respect to the LA Times, the Times hasn't done anything this good as yet about this case. This really goes into the details of what the DA is alleging. And when I read this in detail over the last 48 hours, it raises all kinds of questions to me about the thinness of this case being brought by the DA. As I said in an editorial on this station heretofore, this has been an open-ended question for 5 years. For 5 years, they've been looking ostensibly at Curran Price, and all of a sudden, 5 years later, these allegations drop. And I raised the question, Mr. President, in my editorial of whether or not the timing of this was propitious for a particular person. I'll leave that alone. That's not yours to opine on. I understand. But this piece, I want people to read at BennyWally.com, raises some serious questions about, again, the thinness, the efficacy, if you will, of this case that's being brought by the DA. And I believe that if every member of the council reads this particular piece and they have the same kinds of questions I have, this process that you are starting on Friday that does not presuppose an outcome might not be worth our time. And if it is, at least the vote will not be to suspend Councilman Price until at least he has had a say. Mine is not to defend Curran Price, as you know. My point is always the same. Fundamental fairness, presumption of innocence, due process. That's what I said about MRT. That's what we're saying about Curran Price. And I just don't want to see a rush to judgment where somebody gets maltreated in a situation where a case may be very, very thin and may not hold up. Furthermore, when you look at, I looked last night at the numbers, the data for the DA. With all due respect to Mr. Gascon and his office, they're not very good at these cases. When you look at the data of the number of cases they lose in matters similar to this, they ain't got a good track record. And I recommend that people look at those numbers. All of that said, let me just ask where Marquise Harris Dawson is concerned, and he's a regular guest on this station. He's welcome to come on my program or Dominique's program, anybody's program, and respond to this. But I was concerned, I must say publicly, when I saw that he had signed on to your motion to start this suspension process. There ain't but 3 black folk on the council, and you've got 14 other people that could have signed off on this. But one of the 2 black members signed off on this. I got a real problem with that. I say so publicly. How did you convince Councilman Harris Dawson to sign this motion to begin this suspension process?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of convincing. And let me first take one giant step back, because you just said a lot. And in fact, I have read that article, and I find many of the arguments in that article very compelling. And those are exactly the sort of issues that I think that the Rules Committee should consider on Friday. And, when we're evaluating this, it's not in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. You're what options the council chooses to take is not in a vacuum. It's not simply because somebody's been charged. Mm-hmm. Charges run the gamut of lots of things. And, in my view, there are many fundamental differences between these charges and anything else that we've seen before. It's not my role to defend Mr. Price either, as you said, but it's also not my role to condemn Mr. Price. Mm-hmm. It's my role to consider what is in the best interests, given these circumstances, for the council and also the people of the district. And believe me, I will absolutely be taking into account the sorts of things that were written in that article about the nature of these charges. And I'll just add another thing about why these charges may be different than charges that we've seen in the past. And, people in the media especially like to lump all these things together and say, well, there's all these, corruption charges against all these council members, and therefore the council is a broken institution and it's corrupt. I agree that the council needs some significant reforms, but to tie all these things together as though they're linked is intellectually lazy. And when you see a situation on the one hand where the FBI has done an investigation and a prosecutor at the United States Department of Justice makes a decision about charging, and the evidence is laid out for the public, that's a different situation than when a local elected official, who is our prosecutor, makes a decision to charge and does not lay out the evidence for the public. And to me, those are different situations that need to be evaluated differently. The nature of the charges are different. The degree to which the public has been hurt by these charges may be different. And all of those things are things that we need to take into account in figuring out the appropriate response. And the other thing that I will just say that's fundamentally different about this, what we're doing with starting our process compared to previously, is the Harris-Dawson motion about the engagement of the public and evaluating next steps is being heard simultaneously with the other suspension motion. We are taking these things up together. That was not done previously. The previous council president moved forward asking the council to suspend a member and put the other part on the shelf. We won't do that. We'll have the district and the people of the district engaged every step of the way on this.
Yep. Are there other things that you want to point to? Watching my clock here, we've got about 8 minutes left, and I thank you so much, Mr. President. Excuse me. Thank you so much
my pleasure.
for taking time to do this, man. Is there anything else you want to draw attention to for this audience that you hope will be different from your predecessor, as you put it, Nuri Martinez? And I'm asking because I want to make sure that what we end up with is not just a process that appears to be more graceful and more elegant, but the end game is the same, if that makes sense.
No. Well, yeah, I will point out something different. We've learned from the previous experience, and I hope the council has learned from the previous experience, because moving forward with the suspension has real ramifications. It has real ramifications for the council and for the people of that district. This is not just about the member. It's also about the people of the district. And what we saw with the Ridley Thomas situation, of course, was, a horrendously divisive situation where once he was suspended, that was the only action that the council could take. The council couldn't remove him. And therefore, because he couldn't be removed, we couldn't set a special election. So we're left with this completely unsatisfactory situation where the people of the district don't have a voting representative, and we are legally prohibited from setting a special election to allow the people to elect a voting representative. So it's kind of in some respects, the worst of all worlds. Now, if that is something that we have to do, to separate the member from this body, then we have to take into account that has real ramifications for the people of the district and for the operation of the council as well.
Yep. Let me ask you point blank a couple things. Number one, is this hearing set for Friday too soon?
Well, we may determine it to be. And if it is, then we'll simply take the time that we need to make the correct evaluation of the situation, and we'll continue it if we need to. I don't want to presuppose any outcomes of Friday's discussion because I just don't do that before a debate actually begins. But we may very well decide as a committee that Mr. Price should have an opportunity to answer the charges first, or that we should have a greater opportunity for the people of the 9th District to weigh in. We might very well decide that. But I don't want to presuppose that outcome yet. I
hope you do. Let me just go on the record and say, public, I hope you do, because I just don't want to see the mess that we saw the first time around. I know you don't want to see that either.
That's for sure.
By the first time around, I mean MRT, the last time around. I don't want to see that either. You opined on this earlier, but let me just ask you a point-blank question about it. You do not believe, based on what I heard earlier come out of your mouth, that the LA City Council has a corruption problem?
Well, look, we've had a problem with corruption in our recent history, and I think that's an issue that everyone in Los Angeles needs to take seriously, and we need fundamental reforms. And I've already put forward a whole raft of them, starting with an independent redistricting commission, and then also municipal lobbying ordinance reform, and then also changing the way we do land use decisions in the city so as to take away any kind of incentivization for any corruption. And I've also proposed an inspector general position that will review all of the actions that we take regarding land use to find any indications of fraud or corruption so that we can prevent it from happening in the first place and root it out if it does. So yes, I believe we need to make some really fundamental institutional reforms that I hope to put before the voters in next year's election.
Speaking of which, let me ask you two other things in the 3.5 minutes I have left. Number one, the city charter, as you know, does not demand that a council person in this particular situation at this moment be suspended, and that's where a lot of this confusion comes in. We went through this in the MRT situation. What the charter demands, what the charter doesn't demand, what the council has an option to do, but's not called upon to necessarily have to do. Just give me your thoughts about where we are in the city charter and whether or not now would be a really propitious time to revise the city charter.
Oh, it absolutely is. And we're looking at every part of it because, going through these processes and experiencing them in real life, you find where the flaws are in the charter itself, where the council is not given the tools that it needs in some respects, and where we're given too much liberty and discretion in other areas. And so I'm very much looking at that in ways that we can change that to make sure that not only we address issues of corruption and that sort of thing, but also take away even the temptation of corruption and take away the perception of corruption, because our first job needs to be to rebuild the confidence of the people in their council and in government as a whole, because we can't be effective in doing anything else unless the people have confidence that we're representing their interests. And so that has to be our first priority.
And finally here, what's your viewpoint on the expansion of the council? We mentioned this on our program yesterday. LA is a big city, 15 council seats. Many argue that the city is just too big to only have 15 council members. Your take on that?
No, I absolutely agree. I've promoted it. I've pushed for this. I will continue to push for it. We each represent around 260 or 270,000 people. Each of our districts would be the 16th largest city in California if it was its own city. So we need smaller districts so that the people are closer to their elected representatives, and also so that we have enough seats on the council to ensure fair opportunity for every community in this city to be able to elect someone that reflects their voice and their experience. And right now, it's a game of musical chairs with not enough chairs. And so we have communities pitting against each other, and that shouldn't be what we have in a city like Los Angeles with the incredible diversity that we have here. We shouldn't have communities pitted against each other to the degree that we do.
Let me close on this note. First of all, I want to say thank you for accepting my phone call. I must say publicly, as I've said privately, I've never, and I mean never, at this point, I've never called Paul Krikorian when he did not return my phone call. I have never invited him on this program. He did not accept the invitation to do so. No matter what kinds of questions I'm throwing at him, he always accepts the opportunity to come on, and I am grateful and appreciative for that on behalf of KBLA Talk 1580. And finally, I hope that you are obviously an attorney in your own right, and not just the council president, but I hope that the council in this meeting on Friday or beyond will keep, again, the following in mind: due process, fundamental fairness, presumption of innocence. On that note, Mr. President, I thank you for your time, sir.
It's my great pleasure, Tavis. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I can assure you that as long as I'm council president, we don't just rubber stamp things. We'll be looking at them carefully, and we'll be digging into the details.
I appreciate you. Have a great day. Thank you for your time.
All right. You too. Have a good day.
More of Tavis Smiley after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The biggest medical association in the U.S. no longer wants health professionals to report pregnant women who abuse drugs. The American Medical Association now believes reporting will discourage pregnant women from getting help because they'll be afraid of going to jail or losing custody of their child. In Pennsylvania, a bill that would ban discrimination based on hairstyle has been reported out of committee in the State House. House Bill 1394 was referred to the Rules Committee for further action Tuesday. Sponsor, African-American Latasha Mays of Allegheny, says she's pleased it's finally being more fully considered, as that wasn't the case when the GOP was in charge of the House the past 4 years. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Got a crash in Mid-City area on the 10 westbound past Robertson Boulevard. Right now, the left lane is blocked off and traffic just a mess from the 110 freeway. In San Fernando, getting reports for crash on the 5 stop at Brand Boulevard. Carpooling blocked off there. It is slow from the 210. And in Norwalk, there was a crash on the 605 northbound of the 105. Now, it might still be blocking the right-hand lane. It is a slow drive from the 91. Looks like they're trying to get to the shoulder on their own. In Anaheim, watch out for a ladder on the 57 northbound for Ball Road. That's blocking the right lane.
Nearly 3,000 teen drivers die in car crashes each year. Tire Rack Street Survival is designed to save lives. The one-day hands-on driving school gives teens experience in car control through exercises that include emergency braking and skid recovery. Find a class near you at TireRack.com/survive.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers get 7 shutout innings from Clayton Kershaw to beat the Angels in Anaheim. First shutout win for the Dodgers since June 10th in Philadelphia. LeBron's younger son, Bryce, is transferring from Sierra Canyon High School to Campbell Hall in Studio City. The 16-year-old Bryce will be a junior in the fall. He's 6'6" and already showing star potential. LeBron's oldest son, Bronny, will be a freshman at USC in the fall. Here's something from the downright delusional department. People close to Memphis Grizzlies star John Morant told an NBA writer that the NBA and the media are out to get Morant. Morant was given a 25-game suspension at the start of next season for conduct detrimental to the league, including flashing a handgun in 2 social media videos. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
The pandemic may be over, but many Angelinos could be at risk of losing the place they call home. It's important to know your rights as a residential renter in the city of LA. Did you know eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt that was due before March 31st, 2023? And that you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice, also known as an unlawful detainer. Learn more about your rental rights at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Hi, we're Comparion Insurance Agency. Never heard of us? We know. But to help it stick that our local agents are insurance experts, we're going to say local agent 3 times in the next 5 seconds. Local agent, local agent, local agent.
Find us at ComparionInsurance.com.
Can I help? Who's next?
Tom's part-time barista is now a full-time actor.
Oh, you didn't hear. He got the part on Broadway. Yeah, great for him, bad for our finicky cold brew tap.
Now he needs a star understudy to fill his open role.
And he made the best grande triple shot with oat milk caramel.
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. We instantly connect you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
I think my board out, Miles Lowe, is editorializing in his music choices today. After that conversation, are you suggesting to us that's Current Price's theme song, Miles Lowe? I hear the yeah. He turned it up. Okay. Yeah, Miles is editorializing in his music selections. In truth, June is Black Music Month, and every day on this program we are playing the music of a particular iconic African American artist whose music is on our soundtrack. And if you ain't got Uncle Charlie on your soundtrack, then you missing out. And so today, all 3 hours of this program, you will hear some of the best of Charlie Wilson. We've done it every day this month and will, as we do every year during June. It gives us a good excuse to play a lot of great music. So all 3 hours today, you'll hear the best of Charlie Wilson on this program on KBLA Talk 1580. Once again, we thank the Council President, Paul Krikorian, for coming on to answer those questions. And I think I have a better understanding, as I hope you do, of where the council is on this. But once again, I hope that they will keep those 3 democratic principles in mind: presumption of innocence, fundamental fairness, due process, and it will be what it will be. But again, I encourage you to read that article that I referenced earlier at BennyWally.com. I was happy to hear the council president say he had read the article, and he found many of those arguments to be compelling. That was a significant admission from the president of the city council. So if other council members read that and they find that article to be compelling, then maybe they'll push this thing back and give Current Price a chance to speak for himself. I digress on that. Let me move forward. I got 2.5 hours to go. Let me welcome into this program Vanderbilt Professor David Eichert for a conversation about the recent Supreme Court voting rights decision that went against Alabama Republicans. Now, you know how this court is stacked, 6-3 conservative majority. And as my grandmother used to say, Big Mom used to say, baby, a broken clock is right twice a day. So there have been at least 2 rulings out of this court that have surprised certain people. There was a decision the other day about Native American children. We had a conversation about that some weeks ago on this program, some months ago, in fact. And there were many people who were surprised by the decision by this court to protect the children on Native American reservations from being unduly adopted by folk who don't look like them. I suspected, I said publicly a few months ago, I thought there was a chance that case might be advantageous. The decision, that is, might be advantageous and be a welcome decision for our Native American brothers and sisters, primarily because there are a couple of folk on the court, including Amy Coney Barrett, who have adopted persons who are different than their own race. And so I was right about that in the end. And so that was cause for celebration by our Native American brothers and sisters. Here comes another decision, though, about voting rights in Alabama that went against Alabama Republicans that shocked a lot of people. And to unpack that, again, I'm pleased to have Vanderbilt Professor Dr. David Eichert on this program. Professor Eichert, how are you today, sir?
I am well. How are you doing?
Man, if I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I'm happy to be alive, happy to be on the air, and happy to have you in dialogue. Let me make the most of the 20 minutes that we have left. Let me jump right in. You heard my comments a moment ago that many of us were surprised by this ruling. How did you react when you heard about it?
Again, this is brand new to me. I'm still processing the information myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I understand it, though, even though they ruled the districting of the various voting blocks where you where they make up the districts for the various voting areas, they didn't overturn the last vote in which those districts were mapped out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we get a ruling that, of course, I think there was a similar case in North Carolina a couple years back where they ruled their districting to be unconstitutional. But again, in this particular kind of context, they didn't overturn the actual elections that resulted from that gerrymandered redistricting of the map, the voting map.
Mm-hmm. But it is true, though, that if they had gone all in, the Supreme Court, that is, they did have an opportunity here to gut the last protections of the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Law, of course, from the 60s, and they didn't go that far. I don't know how to read that. What's your take?
This is a court that it's hard to figure. Like you just said with the Native American ruling, and of course the very pivotal upcoming ruling about affirmative action. Mm-hmm. We just know, based on the overturning of Roe versus Wade, that this is not only a stacked conservative court, but it's an activist conservative court. Clarence Thomas tipped his hand even before that ruling that not only was the court going to hear an attempt to intervene and overturn Roe versus Wade, but they were also going to come after gay marriage. There were a couple other items that were clearly on his agenda. So when that came out, it seemed very clear that this was a court that was going to be even more conservative in their ruling than the general conservative population, mm-hmm. Who has is much more moderate on things like abortion and gay marriage, which is why we saw right after that announcement by Clarence Thomas, I think the Senate moved to actually install some protections of gay marriage, because even in a conservative circle, that was a bridge too far, mm-hmm. right, in that regard. So this is it's hard to really gauge why the court is taking some of these steps that would seem that they're a bit more moderate mm-hmm. than the previous postures here of late. I wonder, and again, this is completely speculation, if all of the bad press that they've been receiving as a result of not only those types of rulings, but also these disclosures now about all this malfeasance in terms of taking payments and taking vacations that were not reported, mm-hmm. and all these things that seem very, very problematic in terms of billionaires and millionaires gifting them things that eventually or inevitably affects the ways in which they rule on certain things that these people who are gifting them these things have on their wish list or that are economically advantageous to them. So this is a court that may be responding, particularly the conservative justices, to some of that backlash so that they won't, so that there may in fact be some pressure that's being put on them to actually be less activist in their conservative ruling.
Yeah, I hear your point. It's a persuasive point on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't think any of that means that we're not going to get a ruling on affirmative action a couple of days from now that will disappoint many of us. I'd be frankly surprised. Again, folks were surprised by this ruling vis-a-vis the Voting Rights Act and these redistricting lines in Alabama. Many were surprised, I said earlier, by the ruling on the Native American children, but I do not think we're going to be surprised on the affirmative action ruling. I won't hold my breath on that. When we come forward, though, given that today, I'm looking at my calendar, today is the 59th anniversary of the murders of Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney. Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, James Cheney in Mississippi. Today is the 59th anniversary of the murder of those three young men, those three young boys. And so when we come forward, I want to have a conversation about what this recent decision by the Supreme Court means, broadly speaking, for civil rights. We'll unpack that and a bit more with Professor David Eichert when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
Hey LA, I'm Pastor Xavier Thompson inviting you to join us for a special night of compassion and community rally for Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas at the Southern Missionary Baptist Church, 4678 West Adams Boulevard in the city of Los Angeles, Friday, June the 23rd, 7 p.m. This will be a time for the community to undergird Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas and his family as we approach the upcoming court hearing, which will determine whether or not he gets a new trial. We are urging all constituents, supporters, partners, friends, and well-wishers, those who seek justice for this courageous champion of our community, to join us Friday, June the 23rd, 7 o'clock p.m., the Southern Missionary Baptist Church, 4678 West Adams Boulevard. Let's encourage Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas with our presence, participation, and our prayers. See you there.
In 2020, California established the first in the nation task force to study reparations for African Americans. Their responsibility is to examine and recommend to the California State Legislature potential remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans, with a special consideration for the descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. We encourage you to join the final meeting of the task force in Sacramento on Thursday, June 29th, starting at 9 a.m. in the first floor auditorium of the March Fong Yu Secretary of State Building. To learn more about reparations and the task force, visit the California Department of Justice website at oag.ca.gov, where you can also get details about how to participate in the hearing virtually if you cannot participate in person on Thursday, June 29th for this final public hearing where the task force will present their final recommendations. For more information, reach out to Charles Communication Group at 888-326-0010. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
KBLA Talk 1580 is celebrating its second year anniversary, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Always bet on black and black. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Before new Cascade Platinum Plus, I would pre-rinse all my dishes because my old detergent just wouldn't get them clean. But now, I do dishes differently. A no pre-wash, no rewash, money-back guaranteed kind of different. Because Cascade Platinum Plus has double the grease-fighting power of Dawn built right in, with twice the scrubbing power, giving me a clean that lets me break all the dish rules. I just scrape, load, and I'm done. Yep, so clean. With Cascade Platinum Plus, I dare to dish differently.
King C. Gillette is the modern man's answer to their facial hair. With a complete set of precision tools, the King C. Gillette line offers the perfect fit for your facial hairstyle. Want to try something great? Try the Style Master, the quintessential styling tool that every man needs to craft their style. It's a waterproof, cordless trimmer with a long-lasting 4-directional blade. It's extremely versatile and designed to edge, trim, and stubble in 4 directions on any hair length. Master your style with King C. Gillette.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. We continue now our conversation with Professor David Eichert at Vanderbilt University about civil rights in this particular American moment. I said moments ago that today marks 59 years since these 3 young civil rights workers, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, were killed by members of the Klan while working to register black voters in Mississippi. We had a recent decision by the Supreme Court we were talking about earlier on voting rights in Alabama, but it's all, and we're waiting on a decision on affirmative action. So it's all civil rights in one big, however you frame it. It's all part of the civil rights agenda in this country. So I ask a broad question, Professor Eichert, where you think we are in, again, this American moment on civil rights on the anniversary of the murder of these 3 young Americans?
It's a great question, and we're in a very odd time in our historical moment. It reminds me of Carol Anderson's book White Rage, right, where she talks about how if we look at the historical trajectory of America, anytime you have any type of progress or momentum towards giving Black people equal rights or some type of advantage that puts them closer in line with the advantages and privileges that our white brothers and sisters have had for so long, there is usually followed historically by a white backlash, right? That white rage is what she calls it, right? Lynching campaigns after the Civil War, all the violence that ensued after the fall of Jim Crow, even so far as like having a Donald Trump after having a Black president, a white supremacist president after having a Black president for 2 terms. All of these Anderson points to are actually the cycle of Americans' kind of consciousness when it comes to kind of Black folks. And so I don't think it's unpredictable. I don't think it's surprising that now that we have a first time a woman in the White House and a woman of color in the vice presidency, that's followed by a double downing of white supremacist kind of impulses from the conservative right, which includes a rolling back of diversity and inclusion and equity programs like we just saw in Texas and other places, Tennessee, for example, where I am, where we see somebody like Ron DeSantis, who's running on a platform, an anti-woke platform, which is really white supremacy, thinly veiled. This kind of lost cause rhetoric about, the Confederate past and whatever. We see that a resurgence of that and creating this kind of impression that to talk about Black achievement, to talk about civil rights, to talk about anything that makes white people uncomfortable about whiteness is somehow anti-American and anti-white. In the same breath, in the same moment, we have movement in California for some real significant reparations. We saw that land that was given back to that family it was stolen from. I think it was in Malibu.
Bruce's Beach, Manhattan Beach. Yeah, Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach.
Yeah. Yes. And well, of course, that's unprecedented that kind of thing would happen or be recognized and actually movement on it in a very material way. So at the same time, now we have, of course, African American studies, which is as controversial as obviously that has been. It does mark a movement towards, like in academia, seeing this as a legitimate, field of study.
Yeah.
So at the same time, we have all of these attacks on basic human rights of Black folks. We also have this kind of movement towards like unprecedented kind of inclusivity and recognition. And in fact, what I see this backlash being vis-a-vis what Carol Anderson has said is a response to the fact that Black folks have been winning in terms of pushing these critical agendas to address their historical attacks and historical whatever. So this is, in fact, one of those moments where you see the tugs and pulls of democracy at work.
So let me ask you when we come forward right quick here, how you see this moment, as you put it, playing out during the presidential election season. You mentioned Ron DeSantis. There are others. We'll talk about that when we come forward with David Arkett on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you faced discrimination in Los Angeles? The City of LA Civil Rights Department can help. They investigate private sector discrimination in LA City in commerce, education, employment, and housing. If you're facing discrimination, submit a complaint online for free at laisforeveryone.com. That's laisforeveryone.com or call 213-978-1845.
Another exciting event hosted by Malik Books, Saturday, June 24th at 2 p.m., Westfield Culver City Mall. Next up, The newly published author Aisha Harris, co-host and critic for the hit NPR podcast Pop Culture Happy Hour. Hot off the press, wannabe reckonings with pop culture that shapes me by Aisha Harris. Join us for discussion and book signing. Moderated by Erica Kendrick, Saturday, June 24th at 2 p.m., Malik Books at Westfield Culver City Mall. Wannabe is part memoir, part critical exercise. A blend of personal experiences growing up and consuming pop culture with a thoughtful examination of issues and conundrums audiences face every day. Interracial friendships, obsessive fandom, nostalgia, and intergenerational trauma. See you at the next book signing at Malik Books. That's MalikBooks.com again. MalikBooks.com.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on.
K-Drip. Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got about 3 minutes left in conversation with Professor David Eichert of Vanderbilt. Let me offer this as my exit question and get out of the way. Given all that you said, and given that we saw this Supreme Court ruling on voting rights in Alabama, given that we expect the affirmative action decision to come in a matter of days, given that today, once again, is the 59th anniversary of the murder of Goodman, Schwerner, and Chainer in Mississippi, and all that you said, how do you expect that race is going to show up in this presidential season?
You know, that's such a great question, Tavis. And it'd be nice if I could say, I can predict, right, how that will play out. But it's one of those, we're in an environment where you just don't know how that is going to move. People have to keep in mind that the actual case that's being in front of the Supreme Court was actually engineered by our Asian American brothers and sisters who pushed that, anti-affirmative action campaign because they were saying it was deleteriously affecting their ability to go to, get admitted to certain schools. Mm-hmm. And so you have a push in places like Florida where you have some of our Cuban brothers and sisters and so on and so forth who are actually pushing a anti-immigrant, anti-black and pro-white supremacist agenda. So this is, and again, keeping in mind that Georgia came down to, Asian population that came out in unprecedented ways in favor of Biden, and that kind of turned the tide there. We had indigenous Native American populations in Arizona that came out in mass and supported Biden. That turned the tide there as well. So it's going to be one of those ones where you have to just kind of wait and see. Mm-hmm. I think I'm always surprised both at how rational the American voting population can be, and then how irrational it can be, or how white supremacist it can be in its impulses. Mm-hmm. And I would hope that given some of the extreme rhetoric that we're seeing that is so anti-black and anti-immigrant and is homophobic, transphobic, and so forth, that it would be a bridge too far for even some people who would be leaning conservative, who are independent. But I mean, it's one of those things you just have to wait and see in terms of how it plays out and who decides to come out and vote.
I take your point. I'll close on this note, so I'm out of time here. We'll leave it there. I hear your point about wait and see. With all due respect, I do have a crystal ball, and I can tell you it's going to be ugly. It's going to be vicious. It's going to be a retrenchment like we've never seen when it comes to the issue of race. If Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump continue to do what they have done already, the jury ain't out on how ugly this is going to be. I digress. I'm out of time. Professor Eichert, thank you for the time. We'll do it again, sir. All the best to you.
Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, sir. More of Tavis Smiley after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black